Welcome, everybody, to the Educator's Dilemma, Episode 2. My name is Mike Kentz, founder of AI Literacy Partners, and today I am joined by Dr. Maureen Russo Rodriguez. Maureen is a language and literature teacher at St. Mark's School in Massachusetts, and for the last 3 years she has been spearheading AIPD for the greater independent school community. In 2024, she organized a symposium on AI in education and co-found a teacher-led PD initiative called CoLab, which we're going to talk about in today's episode. She also currently serves on the AI advisory panel for MIT's Teaching System Lab in their development of a forthcoming handbook to guide K-12 schools in responsible decision-making around AI integration. She's also a proud faculty mentor for the Inter-School Student Coalition SAIL, which stands for Student AI Literacy. She holds a PhD from Georgetown University with a focus in comparative literature and Hispanic studies. And in addition to her current work in the independent school classroom, Maureen also offers perspectives gleaned from 15 years of leadership and teaching experiences in higher education, where she served as an associate professor, program coordinator, and chair of academic affairs for a small liberal arts institution. So please welcome me in joining Dr. Maureen Russo Rodriguez. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Mike Kentz, founder of AI Literacy Partners, and I am here today with Maureen Russo Rodriguez. Very excited to chat with you, Maureen. How are you doing?
Doing good, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm really excited because I feel like there are three things we could be talking about in AI in education because you're doing such incredible work. For one, the work you're doing at St. Mark's School in Massachusetts. And then also this incredible collab group that you've put together with Nate Green at Sidwell Friends and a number of other educators who are all contributing to the construction of this collaborative group that I want to hear about. And then also you're working with MIT on the construction of, walk us through that. Let's just lead us off with that. What's that project all about?
Oh, the MIT project.
Yeah.
This is a publication that's about to drop later this month, if it's on schedule, and it's a guidebook. It's called Guide to AI in Schools: Perspectives for the Perplexed, and it's coming out of MIT's Teaching Systems Lab, which is run by Justin Reach, and essentially I'm on the advisory board for this publication. I'm not a researcher or a writer for it. But what it's trying to do is bring together a bunch of perspectives from K through 12 teachers across the country and put them into a guidebook that is going to be a great starting point for school leaders who want to begin to grapple with the idea of so what are the questions that I need to be asking if I'm trying to lead my school at a moment like this? And it's very much going to be a disappointment as a guidebook to someone who's coming to it hoping for something that's going to be here's exactly what you need to do.
Right.
But that's kind of why I love it, because if research is trying to guide K through 12 schools right now, really anyone who tells you they have exactly the answer that you need about what to do with AI in education is just selling you something.
Right.
Because it's a sea of gray, and the importance of bringing different perspectives together so that school leaders can consider them and to collate all of the most important questions along with a list of resources to explore them, I find to be an incredibly helpful endeavor.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see it. And that sort of segues into what I would love to hear is your journey to get to that place, to be able to bring together all those ideas and also the conclusions that you just named about this being a sea of gray. This is not a situation where any of us really know exactly what to do. We're really just experimenting and trying new things. So is that kind of where you started? And also, if you could tell us a little bit about what you teach and how you ended up at St. Mark's School, and then how you came to really put a lot of energy into trying to figure out the AI question.
That's like a million questions in one, Mike. Where should I start?
Well, I just want to hear your journey. How did you get to a point of saying, okay, I am going to put time and energy and effort into figuring out what to do in my classroom and experiment and get to these conclusions that you're naming?
Around AI. Okay, so I came to independent schools from higher ed. in 2020, so I still feel relatively new to independent schools, but I've learned a lot, especially through the CoLab network. Um, I teach English and Spanish at St. Mark's School, um, and my background's in comparative literature. I came to be involved in leadership and faculty PD around AI in the same way I came to be involved in anything that I'm passionate about in my career, which is that like it was really born of collaboration with other people. Um, Mike, do you remember an article that came out? It must have been late 2022 in the Atlantic. That it feels like ancient history now, but it was called "The College Essay is Dead." Do you
I
remember that
do.
article?
I do. Yep.
So at the time that that article dropped, like I was just like, and um, overtired mother of two teacher one evening reading that article and thinking, gee, like there was one part of it where they're like, it's going to take education 10 years to truly respond to this problem. I'm sure there were lots of other good parts of it, but that's the part that I remember. and, and I was like, damn, like we need to talk about this. And at that point in time, and here's where the collaboration comes in. I decided, I'm just gonna something that I had never done before at St. Mark's. I'm just gonna send an email to all of the humanities departments listservs, and I'm gonna say, "Have you all seen this article? And it says this, and like, let's try to speed that up, and like, we should all be talking about this. It's equal parts terrifying and exciting, and it feels really important." And to my great horror, people responded to that email individually, like just to me. And here is where I'd like to give a shout out to my colleague at St. Mark's, Ron Spalletta, who responded and said, let's do something about this. Let's organize a round table. Let's just bring people together to talk about it. And at that point in time, Ron and I were humanities teachers who cared deeply about teaching. It's one of the reasons why I transitioned from higher ed to independent schools. Longer story for another day. And cared deeply about dialogue about AI. Not because we were like rah rah excited, but more from a place of terror.
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
we organized a few roundtables at St. Mark's with the support of our dean. And then, with more tremendous support from a generous alum of St. Mark's, Ron and I, ended up launching a year long period of grant work where St. Mark's gave us a little time and space and financial support so that we could take a class at University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education, learn a little bit more about AI and in the context of pedagogy, try to offer some PD at St. Mark's, and then also organize a symposium that would be for interschool collaboration with other independent schools, mostly St. Mark's peer schools in New England, but others actually got involved too. That was April 2024. And through that whole year, I felt like a humanities teacher who was just trying to scale a learning curve that I was never going to reach the top of. And I still very much feel that way. So that is how I ended up connecting with a lot of other teachers who I think shared my convictions and experiences and really believed that interschool dialogue was the way forward. Um,
I love that.
and Colab was born from that
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, although I can get back to the story of Colab later in this conversation if you like. I
Yeah.
think that, like, from to add another layer to my journey in as an educator thinking about I really feel like I have um, a vantage point as a language teacher that is unique because I started teaching language in 2007 at Georgetown University. You were a student there. What language did you take?
What? Oh, I took Spanish.
I could have been your teacher, Mike, for
Oh,
like
wow.
1 or 2 years there.
Okay. All right.
But that would, in any
Hopefully,
case,
hopefully I did my work.
but you'll remember then that that was around the time that Google Translate dropped.
Hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you won't get in trouble
No, no,
if you
it's
tell me
okay.
that you knew about that. But I remember at that time that my colleagues and I, who were teaching Spanish in the Spanish and Portuguese department at Georgetown, like we could have filled a coffee table book with like the hilarious, terrible bloopers of Google Translate at that time, and it felt so safe to be like, this is nothing to worry about.
Right.
This is laughable. You
Yeah.
know, like we get things like mermelada de papel, which was like paper jam, but actually like marmalade made of paper, you know, and that was what it was. But over the next few years of my teaching career, and as I like moved from graduate student to professor role, like Google Translate got really good, really good. It was not a laughing matter anymore. And seeing that play out, not in a short time span, um, I think gave me the perspective that I needed to like really not dismiss ChatGPT and other LLMs when they hit the scene in the way that I think I might have and that many of my colleagues did. Um, if I hadn't had that experience of seeing a generative technology just go from zero to hero.
Right.
Um,
Right. It's funny you say that. There's two or three things you said that really resonated with me. The first, on that last point, I feel very similarly about sort of my own experience during the 2010 2016 timeframe. I was working as a journalist, and we were hearing every day. I was a print journalist, wasn't a video journalist, wasn't doing podcasts or anything like that. And we were hearing every day that our business model was under attack. We needed to change, we needed to update, and I was one of the people who said we're fine. There's always going to be a need for print journalism. There's always going to be a need for investigative journalism and analysis. And I didn't update my skill set during that time because I felt like I had worked really hard to become a good journalist. And years later, moving into education and then experiencing this moment in 2022, 2023, I remember feeling the same way. I remember feeling like this is the same type of sort of emotional and psychological acceptance pathway that I have to go to, and I want to do it faster than I did last time because it took several years for me to come around. And so that really resonates with me, that experience of if you've kind of been through this before where something sort of, for lack of a better word, attacked, what we were used to doing, it's much easier to sort of adapt in that moment. Would you agree?
I would totally agree,
Yeah.
and I think that that's what can be powerful and empowering about being part of our generation, and that like we moved from analog to digital at a time when we were still like very much under construction as human beings.
Yeah.
But it's also what's terrifying about AI in the realm of education because it is so new, and some of us have experiences that we can bring to it, and cautionary tales we can compare it to, but a lot of it's just uncharted territory in ways that we don't even know yet.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings, for me, it brings it back to that collaboration point you were making. When I talk with other educators, a lot of them express frustration that they can't find people to collaborate with. And, at my school, I was teaching ninth grade English at the time, and I always termed it a collaboration desert. I just couldn't find folks that wanted to talk about it. And I understand why, right? It was very overwhelming. There were no clear answers. And that's why I started getting on Substack and LinkedIn because I was like, I need to find other people to talk to about this. And I think it's so amazing that St. Mark's supported you the way that they did, and also that you got those responses, even though they weren't reply all and they were directly to you, and they put all of the onus on you. It's still amazing that there were people who were ready to have that conversation. So, it sounds like a lot grew out of that. Is that a fair way of capturing it? Just a couple of people being interested, and those roundtables turns into what's now, it sounds like a national network of teachers who are collaborating on this.
I would say that yes, that's accurate. Although the drive to create collab came from not within St. Mark's, although certainly the support of that grant that allowed the symposium to happen came from St. Mark's. The collab was born, and I'm glad that Nate Green did not join us because he would totally contradict me right now. But it was his idea. He'll try to tell you otherwise, but
Okay.
it was his idea. Nate and I connected because during that year that I mentioned that I was a humanities teacher trying to just like figure out what this landscape even was, with the support of that grant, I attended lots of conferences because I was like, I'm going to go shopping for a keynote speaker for our symposium that's happening in a year that I have no idea how I'm going to structure it or whatever. And I attended virtually all of ISTE. Are you familiar with ISTE?
Mm-hmm.
And or a lot of sessions at ISTE. And ISTE in 2024, this was what, like July, was a lot of, at least the panels that I like ended up attending were like rah 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 ed tech. Isn't this amazing? It's gonna like make so many things possible. And then I got to this session, um, and it was Nate Green and some colleagues, and he was like, "We have to avoid this hype and the tech solutionism, but we also can't go too far in the other way of being like this is all bad. Like we need to like step into the complexity and figure it out." And I was like, "That is the person who needs to come to our symposium." And I'm just lucky that he responded to my email and said that he would, because
Yeah.
that began a partnership between Nate and myself, in which I've learned so much. And after the symposium, when my grant, Ron and I, our grant cycle was over, it was disappointing because there was not a lot of direction we could go. Nate was like, we just made so many great connections at that conference. There's so much great energy. There were brilliant other people there. We have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And if it weren't for him and that vision that he had, collab would have never happened. Um, we got together a group of people that summer, 9 of us actually from different independent schools. Most of whom had been at the St. Mark Symposium, but some that Nate pulled in contacts that he had from other places. And we were like, let's pilot this thing. For a while, we were calling it a Vanguard group, but we didn't really know what to call it. And let's pilot this thing wherein each month we're going to design an exploration, like like guidelines around a specific AI topic that's ripe for us to experiment with in the context of teaching and learning specifically. Like how can you use this in the classroom? How can it help and hinder learning? Where does it work and where does it not work? And let's bring people together, explain what the exploration is, tell them to go off and do some independent work with it, bring them back together, and talk about it. And that was the whole gist of it. And Nate was like, this is going to be awesome. And I was like, yeah, independent school teachers just have oodles of time. They're going to like sign up to do, evening work, evening Zooms. And I'm like, but whatever. Like, it felt inspirational. The people felt cool. I was like, let's just give it a try. That was September. We had 9 people. And then by November, we had several dozen people just by word of mouth. And then by January, we had more than 100 people. And now we have, I think, somewhere close to 500 people who are active participants in Collab from across the country and beyond. Mostly independent school educators, as that is our like main network and the way we started, but not exclusive to independent schools either.
Yeah, and so for our audience who might want, already be thinking that they want to join, this is a monthly meetup that is free and educators can sign up. And how could someone sign up if they wanted to join?
Well, I will give you the link so that you can put it into
There we
your
go.
little
Yeah,
Substack. Yeah.
beautiful. Okay.
And
Yeah,
but
there
it's
were.
easy, and it's also not something that people have to do every month. It's set up in a way that you can check in and check out.
Yeah.
And another great thing about it is that in its very structure and the way it functions, it's extremely collaborative in that all of our explorations are the product of a collaborative design process between educators from different schools. Many of whom in this past year had never even worked together before they met through Collab, and then Nate convinced them to be like, why don't you like work on this exploration on this topic together, which is I find energizing and beautiful at a moment where everything else just feels kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I attended the last session in July, and there's two things that you said and that resonated with me while I was there. Number one, the structure of it. I really enjoyed the structure of breaking out into small groups, talking about a specific question or a specific prompt or a specific activity with two or three other educators, coming back to a whole group. And that kind of structure, I've been in so many PDs and so many webinars and so many workshops, I'm sure you have been as well, where you don't get to talk and you don't get to share your ideas and you don't get to talk about what it is that you're trying to figure out. And I think that, it's called collab for a reason, but I thoroughly enjoyed being able to hear from specific people and respond, and also step back and be in a whole group setting where somebody is presenting something, even if it's just an idea, even if it's just a prompt, that gives me something to think about that I hadn't thought about before. And I haven't really seen a lot of that type of structure, and I think that feeds into this idea of that's to me a very sort of K-12 approach, right? It's very get the students involved, let's hear from everybody. And you mentioned going from higher ed to K-12, and I'm curious, as you look at this landscape, how do do you see a difference in the way K-12 teachers are responding to this compared to higher ed? And, is there something to learn from either group or both group?
I mean, education overall is just in a hard place right now, Mike. And like, I think that, I worked for 15 years in higher ed. I When I decided to come to independent schools, I was working as an associate professor and in a lot of in a administrative leadership role as chair of academic affairs at a small institution. I didn't live through the dawn of generative AI tools like ChatGPT in higher ed, but I'm still in touch with my colleagues who are there. But something that I remember, and not especially fondly in my case, about working in higher ed was that as a faculty member, I was called on to be, as you and I have mentioned before, a subject matter expert, advancing my expertise and my profile in my discipline. And the notion that I would take the copious amount of time and energy that it takes to reinvent an approach to teaching and take my time away from the thing that could get me the job security I needed.
Right.
Like, in order to do that, like, why? Like, it's a system in which, in higher ed, and it's set up this way for a reason, to advance knowledge in the world, in the disciplines, in the communities of universities. But when that's the incentive placed in front of faculty and that's the system that they're used to for centuries, all of a sudden getting everyone to rally around this idea that they need to think deeply about their teaching,
Right.
It's more of a shock to the system than it is for a small independent school where none of the teachers have that mindset and that systematic structure of their jobs and promotions that depends on them publishing books and articles and like really being subject matter experts. Teaching and good teaching is their subject matter expertise, or it should be. So in that way, independent schools and K through 12 schools are able to be more nimble.
Yeah.
But they're only as nimble as they decide to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what's holding it. And I'll speak to independent schools because that's the context that I know right now. I think that is what is holding us back, is that there are certain schools whose leadership decides that they want to really dedicate the time that's needed to rethink approaches to teaching in light of this paradigm shift. And there are other schools who, for whatever reason, are not willing or able to take that step back. And that's understandable because I think independent schools have been overextended for a long time in all the things that we are trying to do at once.
There's a really interesting tension that's surfacing for me as you say these things. In independent school, if we think about it, the benefit of being independent is the freedom, right? And that is precisely what I think allows for perhaps more experimentation at a private school than, for example, a public district school. And I'll tell you that, when I talk with public district schools, the bureaucracy and the logistics are so intense to try and get through that experimentation, at least in my experience, doesn't really seem to be happening very much at the public K-12 level. So that's the good part about being an independent school, and that was the same experience for me. I went to my principal and said, I want to try this. Are you okay with it? And he said, send an email to your parents of your students. If they're okay with it, then yeah, I'm good with it. And that was all I had to do. But to get to your
Good for you, Mike, by the way.
Yeah,
Good
thank
for
you. But then to your other point, though, the subsequent drawback of the independent school structure is getting people to walk in lockstep and do things together and collaborate, right? Multiple independent schools coming together to potentially innovate as a group, because of course that's not part of the incentive structure of the independent
It's not the
environment.
way we've operated.
Right.
But when you really take a step back and think about it, like it's kind of like, and I've been screaming this in my head for a while, like, can we just be independent schools but together? Like a little bit more together, independent together?
Right.
Because, and even in one of your insightful questions that you sent me before this call, like, what advice do I have for people who are leaders in independent schools who want to replicate this within their own school, replicate a collab like model? I mean, even just the notion that when you find a good thing, you should replicate it within the context of your own school. I think it's understandable that we have that mindset about it, but it's also not the way to approach this problem right now. It doesn't, like, when we can work together at a point at which there are not clear answers, and when the thing that is most clear to everyone who is close to it is that the answers are going to come from teachers. They're not going to come from external, forces or from the CDC or even, from consultants. No offense. Like they're going to come from teachers who are empowered um, and who have the literacy and the agency to move things forward. When that's the case, like, don't you want teachers to be talking to each other?
Yeah.
It's just like it's so duh, but at the same time, I can see why it's not the like it hasn't been the trend, and it's hard for independent schools to pivot in that way.
I agree wholeheartedly with the bottom up change approach. And that was something that Nick Pokolitsky, I don't know if you know him,
I don't know him, but I do read his Substack sometimes.
yeah, and so he and I originally met on Substack, and he was a high school English teacher, I was a high school English teacher, and that's how we started talking. And we both agreed that we felt like everybody was coming at this from the wrong way and thinking, everyone's saying, "Where's the policy? Where's the policy? Where's the policy?" And we're going, "You're not going to get to a policy without experimenting at the ground floor." In the weeds in your classrooms, and then subsequently reporting back to whoever it is that's forming policies, and recognizing that it's going to be a cycle. It's going to be an ongoing cycle of experimentation, policy formation, and reformation as we develop. And that was something that he and I really resonated on, and we tried to
Amen
write.
to that.
Yeah, we tried to co-write we co-wrote this book and self-published it with that in mind. We called it a teacher led roadmap, because that's the way it has to happen right now. And I've talked with other policy folks who do agree with me also. They have said to me, we can't figure out how to convince everybody at the policy level that what really needs to happen is incentivizing experimentation and sharing data back up to us. So I'm so glad to hear you
It
say that.
requires time, and
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
commodity that like is in very short supply.
Right, right.
And I think it's
Um,
also easy for teachers and school leaders to, at least I've seen this, and I'm glad to say I see it less and less than I did a year or two ago, but a tendency to kind of group like AI approaches or mindsets into two buckets, and one is like pro AI, and the people who are pro AI are the ones who think that like we need to teach students to use it, and they need to be using it all the time, and the teachers need to use it, and everyone needs to use it, and it has to be everywhere in the school. And then the other bucket is you're anti AI because you think students need to learn the way that they always did because there's something important about that. And those are not the buckets,
mhm,
people. Like
yeah.
those, you like I am a pro teacher literacy person um, who believes teachers should be constantly experimenting, who does not believe, or who I'll put it in a positive way. I believe that like there are places, many many places where it is not the place to bring AI into the classroom and ask students to use it.
Mhm.
Um, I think experimentation is needed in order to suss out like where those boundaries are, where can it help, where can it hinder, which is why I love collab. Um, but I think what a lot of school leaders are not getting is that even if what you want as a goal for your school, and if you're an independent school, then like you as the school leader get to make the goals, right? Even if what you want is to keep AI as far away from your students as possible, your teachers need mad literacy skills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the only way for them to get those literacy skills is with hands-on work and experimentation, and that takes time. And
Yeah.
that's it's not the answer, but it is the only way forward
It's the
right now.
start. It's the first step, right, or the second
Yeah.
step, depending on how you think about it.
It's a very, very long, probably hundreds of first steps.
Right.
But if we don't start taking them, there's not going to be like a magic solution that comes, or maybe it will be, but ed tech is going to sell it to us without our decision making power in the process.
Yeah. And that leads, I wanted to go back to something you were talking about. I think it was an ISTE conference you went to. And for me, at least, what this reminds me of was realizing that the humanities has a role in this process. As an English teacher, I remember thinking, okay, this is a tech skill. I'm not really a techie person. I don't think I'm really going to understand this. And, that changed for me over a period of time. But I remember, just to sort of share a story, I went to an ISTE conference, and I'm not trying to sort of throw them under the bus, but because they are an ed tech, they're a technology organization. But I went to all these sessions, and they were everyone I met was a technologist. And I remember thinking, where are the English teachers? Where are the writing teachers? Where are the history teachers? Where are the language teachers? Because
At
to
home
me,
freaking out.
yeah. But a week later, and I'll plug another conference if I can. There's a conference run by the University of Central Florida
Okay.
called Teaching and Learning with AI, and I went to that one, and it was literally a week later, and everybody there was an English teacher or a writing teacher, and I remember feeling when I left ISTE, I was like, okay, we have a longer climb than I thought, and then I got to this conference, and I said, okay, humanities professors and educators are picking up on this. They have a role. There's a lot of questions. And so I just, wanted to share that story and then sort of ask, how do you think, if I can figure out how to frame this, how do you think, what is humanities' role? What is STEM role? Where do we come together? How do you think that changes as a result of generative AI, I guess?
I can't speak to what I think STEM's role should be because I think it's just aside from collaborate with humanities because interdisciplinary dialogue is the way forward. But I love your question about humanities' role because at at the encouragement of a colleague, I participated in a panel where like the question was like, how does AI change the role of teachers? And like I'm like, I don't think it does. And I was like, it was just, but it changes a lot about how we perform our roles, especially in the humanities, of writing. Because writing for centuries and not without a good reason has been the cornerstone in the humanities and I'm sure in disciplines outside of the humanities, but I'll speak for the humanities. Writing has been the cornerstone of how we teach students to think, how we teach them to synthesize, how we teach them to reason, and the cornerstone of how we measure how well they're doing those things. And it's been a great mechanism for that. But generative AI really, really dices up that mix. And the questions we need to be asking ourselves now, I think, are, to what extent do we need to teach the things the way we've always taught them? To what extent do students no longer need certain skills? But I also think the question is, like, how do we preserve the skills that I personally believe in, like, my deep convictions that human beings still need even though AI can do them?
Mm-hmm.
How do we preserve that in a world where AI tools exist?
Yeah.
Because I do think that, do you listen to Hard Fork ever?
No.
Okay. Well, if you do, they
On
talk a
purpose.
lot about like how great it is to use AI tools for different things. They bring in different perspectives, but I feel like I listen, I think sometimes just because I get such a kick out of like, and education, where is that? Where's education?
Yeah.
Because I think in the conversation about what AI tools can do, people who have been educated already, people who have learned to think for themselves and to write for themselves, it's just so easy to take for granted the synthesis and free thinking skills that you have at your disposal that allow you to use AI tools effectively, that allow you to like not sacrifice some free agency that you should have as a member of society when you use AI tools. And I think that that's dangerous, because that, if that's the mentality of the tech industry, like who's keeping it all in check for education and the next generation?
Yeah, you're reminding me. I did listen to a podcast with technologists. It wasn't Hard Fork, where a number of they're mostly entrepreneurs in the tech space, and they were all talking about how education is broken, and it's been broken for a long time. And they weren't talking about Gen AI; they were just talking about education in general, and they were really bashing education to a point that, of course, hurt me on a personal level a little bit. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, every person that's on this podcast is a product of the American education system, and they're all extremely successful, and none of them are attributing their success to, like you said, the thinking skills, the metacognition, the communication skills that they built at some point. Okay, maybe not every single teacher they had was perfect, but I remember thinking, I don't think culturally, especially in the tech space, there's a understanding of the connection between what you got while you were in your K-12 experience and higher ed that allowed you
The
to
very
get to
skills
this.
that are allowing you to articulate opinions right now about
Exactly.
emerging technologies. Yeah, that's such a great observation, Mike. Although I do think that like education is fundamentally like it's got flaws that are coming to the surface, and
Right.
I'm just
Right.
I'm not saying anything like novel here, because I think a
Right.
lot of people are writing about this already. But
Yeah.
there are things that are fundamentally flawed about education, that generative AI is really bringing to the fore,
Yeah.
which is why it's mind blowing to me that schools are not able to say like, okay, pause on some other stuff that we have to do. This is important.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's going to take to get schools to that point. Perhaps it's teachers who advocate for it. I'm disappointed in professional organizations whose codified mission it is to provide like curated resources and quality training for schools. I think no one knows where to turn right now to provide that kind of quality training for generative AI for school leaders, and I think that as a result we're in like a state of like paralysis of some kind, where we, even when we know it's important, we don't know exactly how to act, and every way that we turn that might be the right way forward it's just a steep incline,
Yeah.
and we don't know how to justify to our stakeholders that it's time to put some other things aside in order to start that journey.
Yeah. You mentioned the value of time, and let me ask you a question here on that. What do you think, would it be a good solution or a helpful step for regulations to be a little bit stricter, in the sense that there's the age limits are perhaps lifted a little bit from 13 up to maybe 17 or something like that, and are actually enforceable? And you can still bring AI into the classroom, but students don't have free access at home. How do you think that would be? I've always thought of that. That would be a nice way to give educators some time to catch up, because it's not, you don't have to worry about a 12-year-old logging into ChatGPT to write an essay. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that the 12-year-olds are still going to log into ChatGPT to write their essays at home, and some who can do that are going to do it, and others who, I guess it would help in some ways, but it wouldn't help in others. If I've understood your question correctly, but feel free to reframe it, because I'm not positive I did.
Yeah, I was just thinking stricter regulations that actually enforce age limits. Right now, of course, you can just lie about your birthday, which is why I recently spoke with some fifth grade teachers who said that their students are using AI on their assignments, and that surprised me. I didn't think it was that that young of students who were using it. I understand it'd be very difficult to enforce that kind of a rule, and I think that's usually what the tech companies say. But I was kind of thinking, perfect world, if you could actually enforce those age limits, lift them a little bit, but allow for experimentation in the classroom so that we can kind of figure things out. Would that be a viable pathway forward? But of course, there's a lot of caveats that come with that.
I think that more students able to experiment with AI within a context where adults or teachers are helping them, and teachers need literacy to be able to do that well.
Yeah.
But I think that is, I completely agree with you that is ultimately part of the way forward that we have to take. but I do think that it's without the teacher. I just see the teacher literacy as
Right.
such an important first step that like I'm not even there yet in my thing. I'm not caught up to you,
I hear you. Yeah.
because until the teachers understand, then they can't be that, they can't guide students, and that's a problem if you're going to give students more access without guidance, especially younger and younger students.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you as sort of a wrap up question then. If we do need, adults do need AI literacy on their own in order to figure out where or when or how this fits into the educational context, what, if anything, has been successful for you in sort of moving hearts and minds and sort of change management and getting other educators to get on board with that idea that we need to learn it deeply in order to help our students?
I haven't had as much success at my own school as I would like. I haven't given up. Um, I think that something that has been extremely helpful that you mentioned yourself, as something that you lacked your last year in the classroom is finding teachers at others, having a network, having a community of teachers beyond your school who have the same conviction that you do, and hopefully like this can spread so that more and more teachers are just on board with it and less people are resisting. But that community and solidarity that was, I don't think ever our initial like intention in founding collab, like it was part of it. I don't think we realized how big a piece of it is, because without that, then individual teachers back at their schools who are coming up again and again against resistance from their colleagues, or the we just don't have time for it from the administrators, like they don't have the resilience to continue to advocate, and that's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, on that note, I will definitely put the link to Colab into the Substack, and we'll put it on the YouTube when we publish this. But what else do folks need to know to potentially join? Are there other logistics or things that they should be aware of? Final notes on how to get involved with Colab and how to track the work you're doing too.
Absolutely. So collab is, you don't, there's no prerequisite for the level of AI experience that you need, but I will say that it's a community that has evolved with time so that there are lots of veteran people. We bring the beginners right into the conversation with the folks who are more experienced, but it's also a really appealing community to join if you're already someone who's experimenting and you want to be challenged by other people who are experimenting too. Each month it's something different. Like I mentioned before, you can check in and check out. We have had, AI for lesson design, AI for metacognition, AI for engagement. We're kicking off this year with AI for active learning, which is our September cycle. I'll give you the dates for that and a way for people to sign up.
Sure.
You do need to know that it's a little, it's about a 2 to 3 hour commitment in a cycle, and that's a month. You watch, you join in a live or watch a recorded intro video that's maybe about 20 to 25 minutes that orients you to the exploration of the month. The designer of the exploration will tell you, here's how you need to approach it. Here are some tips. Go forth. You should experiment for, we recommend 45 minutes on your own with a guided exploration that's provided for you. Then you come back, and this is where the magic happens, to the collaboration call, which you joined, where people are sharing out their experiences and through a guided framework of questions that are designed by the people who design the explorations, so that you can test the limits and compare experiences across disciplines, across tools. You don't need to have a pro membership to any of the frontier models in order to do collab, but we do ask that you use frontier models rather than specialized tools like Flint and Magic School. And the invigorating part of it all is that it is a network, so that we encourage you to reach out to other people that you met during the calls if you want to connect about things outside of the collab conversations. So I think that that's about it as far as like the things that you truly need to know in order to get started.
Amazing across the board. I think this is just such an amazing thing that you guys have put together. 500 plus educators, people who want to collaborate. This is a place to do it.
Are you coming back in September?
for sure. Well,
Gonna do the
I'll be
gonna do the
back.
exploration before
I'll
you
be
join the
back.
collaboration call.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Okay.
I got to make sure the schedule is aligned and everything, but I'm definitely going to be back just to listen and learn, just to hear what people are doing. It's an incredibly valuable place to collaborate, of course. So, thank you for reaching out to me, by the way back when, and I'm glad that we found this time to do this because I learned more. I learned more about what you're doing. I learned more about what's happening in CoLab, and I really appreciate your time, Maureen. Thank you so much.
Have you heard about the bet, Mike?
No, what's the bet?
The bet was what I said to a few other collab
Yeah.
leaders. I'm going to reach out to some Substackers. I'm going to invite them to join. People were like, bet you this much money, Maureen, that like the Substackers are not going to join. And I'm like, I think they will. I think Mike Kens is going to join. And
I,
thank you because I am recently $100 richer thanks to your attendance.
There you go. There you go. If you want to make another bet, maybe I'll cut this from the podcast. Make another bet that like pretend I won't come back and then I'll come back again, make you some more money.
Okay, we can
Yeah.
split the difference.
All right. Thank you so much, Maureen. I appreciate you
Thanks for
coming
the
on.
opportunity, Mike.
Of
See
course.
you soon, hopefully.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Educator's Dilemma from AI Literacy Partners. If you found it valuable, please don't forget to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends and colleagues because we are all learning our way through this and we are better when we do it together. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.